We're going to start our live stream here, just getting the show going and just making sure that I don't screw it up like I did just a little while ago. So hopefully if you were not, if you were logged on earlier and you were waiting, I kind of screwed up about a half an hour ago, but maybe that's what happens when I haven't been doing this for a little while, at least a couple weeks, so that kind of threw me off. So once again, this is a Ask Me Anything, and that means that you get to ask me any questions that you want. I'll do my best to answer them. No guarantees that I'll answer them well, but or to your liking, but at least I will do my best to do that. And this is, I think we have a lot of things to talk about today. I didn't have a live stream last week, and the reason why I didn't is I was in Washington, D.C. I was with the Leadership Institute, meeting with other activists from around the country, and we were talking, trying to work on some curriculum for activism training, which I was very honored to be there, invited to be there to help them with that process. And sometimes I'm anticipating that I may be going out, depending on where you are in the country, and doing some activism training, or at least as a guest speaker or something, maybe with the Leadership Institute in the future. We'll see. But there's a certain type of activism that I like to teach that's a little different than what would be typically taught out there. But if you're in Washington State, you understand, know what I mean. And if you aren't, then it's probably the best type of activism to teach people, I think, if you live in a blue-leaning state or in hostile territory, or politically hostile territory. I'm wearing my Air Force Academy shirt here today because my daughter is going to the Air Force Academy next year. So, and when she was just accepted and agreed to signed up, so that's where she'll be. And so that's my recognition. I don't talk too much about my family generally when I'm doing my live stream or my videos for obvious reasons, but I figured I'd mention that, and that's why I'm wearing this shirt today. And a couple things that I just want to clarify before we get going here. If you are going to ask a question, please make it a question and put an @we the governed or in some way distinguish it so that I can actually see what your question is here. Because sometimes it gets a lot of different things start popping up on the screen, and it's harder for me to spot your question if there's not an easy way for me just to draw my eyes right to it. And then the other thing I'd mentioned, as I usually do, is I'll start off mentioning I've got a couple of events coming up that I'll be at. One of them is going to be this Saturday. I'm going to be the MC for the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights banquet, which is their fundraising, their annual fundraiser event. It's a good opportunity to meet other people who care about property rights. I believe it's in Redmond. I didn't take the time, but if you look up Citizens Alliance for Property Rights online, you'll be able to see and sign up for that event right there, and I encourage you to do so. And if you do, let me know that you signed up because you saw this video, and I'll probably get a chance to see you there. It's a good opportunity, again, for a group of people who care about property rights to get together and talk about our wins and our losses, and especially coming out of the weird legislative session that we've had lately. We can talk about where property rights is going from here and how we help defend our property rights. So anyway, that's a great opportunity. And if you're around this Saturday, the 23rd, and I believe it's in the evening, just make sure you go to CAPER, Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, Washington. Look it up and log in and sign up for that event this weekend. Also, I know on April 9th, I'm going to be out in Yakama, and I believe that's a presentation. I usually try to, if I'm going out there to do a presentation at an event, I will also be usually doing some training sessions around that. At this point in time, I just have an event scheduled. Now, that's on a Tuesday, and assuming I'm doing that, and I'll still verify that. I got a couple weeks to go, making sure that gets nailed down, and some of the details are nailed down. I'll probably switch my live stream that week because that'll be a Tuesday. I'll switch it to the Monday. Usually the Monday before is typically what I do when I do that. Since we had our last live stream, the number of things have happened. The legislative session's come to an end. Most of the worst bills didn't make it through the legislative session this cycle. I'm going to attribute part of that just to the fact that I believe that the legislature was, at least the Democrats in the legislature, tended to be pretty distracted from the usual focus and trying to extract as much cash as they can from us. And they got a little bit distracted from that because I think of the initiatives. Certainly the rent control bill died, the property tax increase, or changing it so that they could increase the property taxes at a higher percentage than they have historically been constrained from doing. That one failed. So several of these bills, I think, failed largely for procedural reasons or because the Democrats gave up and decided this wasn't the season for them to push more tax increases. Probably due in part to the fact that they've been squandering tax dollars in our state, just like they do in most states, and just like they do at in the national government. They've been squandering our taxpayer dollars on lots of stupid things. And in Washington State, we have we've had 19 billion extra surplus dollars over the last 5 years, and every penny gets spent and squandered and wasted on stuff that they didn't really need to spend it on. But it's a great gravy train and kickback scheme for your large campaign contributors and for supporters of your the administrative state, right? That's generally what they do. And so when they're increasing taxes, as the governor did with the capital gains tax, as they did with the long-term care tax, which is a scam, or as they did with the Climate Commitment Act scheme, where they're jacking up the secret gas tax and increasing the cost per gallon of fuel by 43 cents. All those taxes were it's money wasted, and it's money that they didn't need. And those are the three that are going to be challenged by the initiatives in November. So there's going to be, the campaign has essentially already started. The legislative session's come to an end. And for the most part, I think everybody's just going to shift into this campaign season moving forward. The one thing to keep in mind, there were some bad bills. I didn't really write down some of the worst bills here, and I think what I'll do is I'll try to do that next session, is have a more specific discussion on the worst bills that did pass the legislature this year. There were a number of things that did pass that were bad, but I'll have to I want to do that a little bit more justice and discuss those in a little bit more detail and at length, and probably do the top 10 worst bills. And that's not what I came here prepared to do today, so I can't really do that off the top of my head. Sometimes I can, but I cannot tonight. So, but if anybody has any specific things they want to talk about as it relates to some of the legislative sessions issues, then it'd probably be worthwhile. We can do that. Also, the real shift that occurs right now is once the legislature, last day of the legislature, they close the door, that's it, they're done. The legislators rush home because essentially now the incumbents in the legislature can start raising money and campaigning for office. During the session, there's a freeze, and none of the statewide office holders or those who are elected to office can actually campaign, raise money, or send out solicitation letters. Some of them still try to do so. Chris Reichel, our head OSPI, which is the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and that's the position that he's occupied for a while. And he did send out a solicitation in the middle of the legislative session, and I did file a complaint on him, and he was officially sanctioned and warned by the PDC a couple weeks ago. I intended to do a little video about that today, but honestly, I caught so many people, and the PDC's kind of caught up to a bunch of them lately. So there's been some fines that have been issued against the Washington Education Association based on my complaints. The Washingtonians Against Discrimination Everywhere, which is the Wade PAC, second time that I've hit them. They had a fine, $1,000 fine, I believe, that just was issued this week. The Kitsap County Democrats, there's actually a whole bunch of others on my website, but there's a few that I didn't update yet because they just came in. The formal sanctions of the fines just came in today, so I have to kind of catch up on that and upgrade my website so that the list there stays maintained. But there's at least several of them that aren't reflected yet in the tally that I keep on my website. So there's a lot that's going on. I know I'm filing a lot more complaints. There's a lot more complaints I haven't filed yet that I will file. And there's a lot of other projects that are here to be worked on going into the 2024 elections as well. I did a couple videos that I was able to record today, which will launch over the next few weeks. One of them is about Evergreen State College, the student that died, and the others that were injured last December, and December 11th. just through sheer incompetence, stupidity. This college is falling apart. The Evergreen State College, clearly, and it wasn't just that they incorrectly installed a tankless hot water tank and then just pumped the CO2 into the building, into the living quarters. It was the fact that their CO2 alarms, which they have there, right, the carbon monoxide alarms, they were just continually going off, and the staff that worked there just kept turning them off and telling everybody it's fine and figuring that the alarms don't really matter. And there's a reason why you have CO2 alarms. And that the poor student that died and the several other students that went to the hospital, they were able to keep them alive, but they're still probably injured, moving forward, not to mention just the sheer brazen incompetence that exists there at that school. This is what happens when you prioritize DEI over everything else, when merit falls away and you're not, I'm sure that's trickling into everything there as the facilities probably break down and the living quarters become substandard and put the students at risk. And really all you've got is a bunch of political appointees and the board of trustees there and this bloated administrative state that's kind of taken over the Evergreen State College, and all they really want to do is just make sure they keep the gravy train going for them. And with this substantial decline in student enrollment, they're serving, if you can call it that, a smaller group of students, doing a terrible job with the ones they have there and lying to others, hopefully trying to entice them to come. And there's really no reason for the state to be subsidizing it. We just really have to shut it down. So beyond the carbon monoxide, yeah, somebody mentions carbon monoxide in one of the comments here. Beyond that article, I also got an update on the North Kitsap School District Superintendent Evans, who was caught stealing the signs. She was charged by the prosecutor in Kitsap County after the police did their investigation, and she wisely chose diversion to avoid jail sentence and any significant penalty. But she did submit a resignation. She's no longer the superintendent of the North Kitsap School District, so she won't plague that community any longer. That's a good step forward. And also, I made an update on, I had an anonymous, the hacking group, Anonymous, apparently they supposedly have a chapter on Yakama. They threatened me 5 months ago. I didn't notice because they misspelled my name. And I don't know what they didn't. I don't know if they followed through on it or they went after a different Glen Morgan. Who knows? But anyway, I just did a quick little video about that. I mean, these were some interesting topics. There's some other topics I wanted to cover. I just didn't have the time to do it today. But that's how we started the day. You'll see those videos roll out over the next week. And just thank you for everybody that's sharing these videos with other people and helping them subscribe. I'm sure that every subscriber I get is one more, it annoys the left just that much more. So by sharing these videos out far and wide, I think that we're able to make an impact sometimes with the stories that we're able to tell and the truth that we're able to reveal. So let's get into some of the questions. It is an Ask Me Anything. Make sure you, again, try to say @WeTheGoverned if you can so that I can catch your question and be able to get it answered, hopefully here. First question is from Philip Stevens, and Philip is asking, how is Fergie doing with his governor run? Well, that's a good question. Bob Ferguson is going to be considered the front runner since he's the lead Democrat, and he's raised the most amount of money of everybody in the race at this point in time. But it's hard to know really how he's doing yet until the primary in August. I mean, truthfully, that's going to be our first measurement of staying power, significance, or however he's doing around the state. Bob Ferguson brings a lot of negatives to this campaign, and he truly doesn't have very good name recognition. Now, the truth is nobody running for office right now has great name recognition, so I don't think that by itself is as big a weakness as it could be, but it also means that he needs to spend a lot of money, and a lot more money than he has, in order to get people to understand who he is. And so I think that, or at least get him to know his name. Now, he obviously has a D next to his name, and he's not the only one. Mark Mullet will be in the race. He's the senator from the 5th Ledge District, the last Democrat, I think, in the state Senate who actually understands math. So, and who's quite angry at Jay Inslee, and I'm sure some of that translates into Bob Ferguson too, when Jay Inslee tried to take him out of office. And so you have Mark Mullet and Bob Ferguson, both Democrats, running for office. You have the two Republicans, leading Republicans anyway, Semi Bird, who I've interviewed here before, Dave Reichert, who I'm hoping to get an interview for before too long. and Dave Reichert being the former congressman from the 8th Congressional District and the former King County Sheriff, who came out of retirement after a number of years to jump into this race. And so those are the two Republicans that are running for office. Essentially, it's a four-way race right now, and two of them are going to get bounced out in the primary in August. That's just the way the top two jungle primary works. And if you don't know how that works, you can go to my YouTube channel, and I have a video I think I put up a couple years ago explaining how Washington's top two primary system works. But Ferguson's in the early stages. We'll see if he's been able to bribe or convince enough of the hardcore left to support him. I think that they will. But he's also made some enemies along the way, even within the Democrat Party. So I don't know how that translates into turnout or financial support for him. We're going to have to see. There's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts on that race right now. I do need to do an update on the governor's race, which I'll try to do on a video soon. I haven't done that yet. I've got a couple things that I want to just make sure I stay on top of, but that's one of the issues that I'm going to try to catch up on, because I noticed a bunch of traffic on my YouTube channel going to one of the older videos from months ago where I did an update at the time, snapshot in time of where the governor's race was. Well, things have changed since then, so I need to do another one pretty soon. Let's see, T.Z. Burton, can you give a recap, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, on the short legislative session? How would you rate our loss of freedoms? Well, every legislative session puts your freedom at risk. It's pretty rare in the last 40 years that we've had a legislative session that didn't in some way erode your freedoms or liberties in some manner. Sometimes the best we could hope for historically has just been a draw where they didn't really do too much. Other times, there have been some times in the 90s and early 2000s where we did have tax rollbacks or cuts. But a lot of that was due to initiatives that were being run at the time. I actually believe the significance of the legislature passing the 3 Let's Go Washington initiatives sponsored by Brian Haywood. I think that that passage and the fact that they're going to be on the ballot this next year is a pretty big deal. I think that we were going to lose freedoms, at this level, and instead we lost them down here. Again, not a step forward, but not as bad as it would have been otherwise. The same thing I'm seeing in a number of other states right now. If you look at Colorado, there's some just terrible things going on there. In a number of states around the country, there's been a concerted effort, mostly by Democrats, but not entirely. Sometimes Republicans go along, and it cuts back on freedom and liberty. Part of that's taxes, too. Anybody who believes the government's going to spend your money better than you, I really question both your attachment to reality and an understanding of history and how it works. The government's taking plenty of taxes right now. They're not spending it well. They waste most of it, but giving them more isn't going to reduce how much they waste, and it's not going to make them do a better job. So, but that's a bigger conversation from around the country. Jason, you got a question, liking the background. What's your thoughts on the Pierce County Sheriff resigning? Did the Ferguson takedown job work? Well, yeah, here's the thing. Pierce County has a serious sheriff's race in play, and if you live in Pierce County, it's probably one of the races that I would pay attention to the most. I'm going to feel better talking about it after I've done a little bit more research on review it. There was one candidate there I'm going to file a complaint on who she didn't file her financial affairs document yet, or at least she didn't as of a day ago. And I'm planning to file that complaint on her. But she looked like the worst candidate in the race. But it's kind of an open seat. It is. So you got a free-for-all. Ferguson's attack on the previous sheriff probably opened the field a little bit there. But at the same time, there's some good people running for office that would do a good job. People in Pierce County have just recently tended to vote Republican in many of their countywide races. So there's opportunities there. It's actually becoming more and more conservative as a county, and so it'd be interesting to see how that goes. But you can never take anything for granted, and the rest of the county has to essentially outvote Tacoma, and we need to pay attention to law enforcement right now, especially coming into an election season of lawlessness. I would anticipate with I don't know if Antifa is going to be unleashed or sent into the communities again. I mean, that seemed like something that they made a lot of hay out of a few years ago. So I could see them pulling that crew out and maybe get a bunch of illegal immigrants with them and send them out there to riot in the street and destroy the communities again. That's kind of the left's main operating platform and a strategy that they follow. And I don't know if we're going to have to worry about that, but we need good law enforcement to be there to, present and to at least try to stop or constrain it. Alex Brown, have you heard of the Brandon Herrera congressional run in the 23rd District of Texas? He's challenging Rhino Tony Gonzalez and had a successful primary. Thoughts or opinions? No, I don't know much about what's going on in Texas actually at all. So I could look it up. Listen, I mean, the primary races, especially, okay, if you have a partisan primary, which is not what Washington has. Washington has other than for the president, Washington has a jungle primary. It's totally different. In partisan primaries, if you got somebody in there who's a Republican, but who's pro taxes, anti freedom, right? I always like it when you can replace them with somebody who knows why they're actually a Republican or a conservative, and they want less government abuse and more freedom and lower taxes. That's great. If you can replace them with somebody like that and they can win in the general, that's always a step in the right direction if they can do that. So I don't know that race specifically, but that I would suggest is a good thing if that's what happened. Now, if you had a guy get through the primary who's got no chance in heck of winning the general, then you're a step backwards. You didn't necessarily move forward, because the Democrat in that race will always be an anti-freedom, pro-higher taxes person and always corrupted by the left and the administrative state. So, question from Angela. Can we vote in person in Washington State? And could you explain how we would go about doing that? You essentially can vote in person when you get your ballot, and this is what I do. And you get your ballot, you can fill it out the way you want, put it in the envelope and all that, and drive by and drop it off directly to the auditor's office where you live, whichever county you live. Don't put it in the mail. Don't trust the post office. The post office has got its own problems. It's not always a conspiracy. It's just when you have bureaucratic decay going on and incompetence, and in some cases some even worse problems, I would skip the middleman and just go and hand deliver it yourself. I would say it's the closest thing to an in-person vote you can get. Do your research at home, fill in your ballot, bring it down there, put it in the envelope, and put it right there into the box. The advantage of doing that is that now it's at the auditor's office, so there's no loss of chain of custody in transit. And at least theoretically, when your ballots are at the auditor's office, they're under some kind of supervision, and you have election observers, presumably, if people are doing the right thing in your county, from both parties that are there observing the election and actually making sure that that your ballots in theory are counted, and at least there's a chance of it being done correctly. So that's how I would vote in person. It's the closest thing to in-person voting you're going to get. Good question, because I do get that question. That does come up pretty frequently. And I see somebody else made the same comment here. North Bend, that's great. Carbon monoxide, not CO2. Yeah, carbon monoxide, that's right, poisoning. I'm still stunned at this Evergreen college situation, and you have to read the State Patrol report. I'm planning to put that in my article, but the timeline is also particularly troubling. I mean, it's just egregious stupidity and incompetence that's hard to actually equate in the real world, but yet that's Evergreen State College. And that, listen, I can understand somebody can screw up and you can make a mistake when you install a tankless hot water tank. It can happen. I've installed them myself. I could see how somebody would make that mistake, but that's the reason why you have alarms. It's the reason why you have alarms in the first place. Same reason why you have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms. I mean, you have those because you're not necessarily going to know that you're poisoning yourself in what you're really doing, displacing the oxygen too. But you're basically people are gonna die. So you have that alarm for a reason. And at Evergreen State College, that alarm worked. It wasn't flawed. It wasn't broken. It worked. It was set up. Somebody there actually knew what they were doing, at least sometime in the past. Guarantee they weren't an Evergreen college student and grad. And so that alarm was working. But the Evergreen staff, the facilities people that were working there, just kept ignoring the alarm, telling the students to go back in. They reset the alarms go off again. Listen, I could see maybe you would do that once, but if it keeps going off, something's wrong. And instead, they just kept sending the students back until they killed a kid, and several of them passed out and had to be taken to the hospital. I mean, it's a horrible story. And again, I do think it's an indication of a collapse in merit and competency, that when those things start being ignored, as Evergreen State College exists to destroy competency, destroy merit, ignore it, and instead create this artificial, DEI, diversity, inclusion, equity kind of die agenda, alternative reality. That's what they put together. And I'm sure that carries down into who they're hiring or how they're looking at who they're hiring for other positions, not just their college professors and the horrible bureaucracy that they have in the administration there, but even further down. And so if you start to lose competency and you're hiring people because they're willing to be brainwashed or go along with whatever your weird agenda is, if that's what you're doing, then these types of instances are going to happen. I don't know what sane student or parent would want to go to a place where they are not going to be keeping you safe. Even basic levels of competency that we generally presume would exist in a modern society, I think they're falling apart in places like Evergreen. We see them happen in big cities already, but in a place like Evergreen, which is a little enclave of craziness in itself, it's going to happen there, and it's a completely avoidable disaster, and it's really sad. Will James? Okay, so this is another question from Jason here. Will they seize Trump's buildings and assets? Okay, I don't know. This is this political persecution of Donald Trump, and that's exactly what it is. It's absurd. There is no other case even remotely like this in New York State. There's such an obsession about attacking Trump and all of his allies that the left has, in this weird dystopian sort of manner where the rule of law is completely out the window. They get corrupt judges, corrupt juries if it's in D.C., and just general complete collapse of the rule of law in this obsessive effort to get Trump. And I think it's kind of a warning to people, right? If they can do that to him, I don't care if you like Trump or not, there should be some recognition that if the administrative bureaucracy and the state, if they can do that to him, they can do it to anybody. Just the same way they're going after Musk now because he doesn't toe the line with X or something else. And I'm not even a huge fan of Musk. It's just amazing. If you don't toe the line, Gabby Giffords, right? Take her out. She's a Democrat, but she's not the good enough Democrat for him, so you got to take her out. Bernie Sanders wasn't who they wanted, so they cheated and took him out in the primary. This is how these people operate, way outside of the realm of just the law or anything else. And the media gives them a pass. And that's probably the more disturbing thing here is the fact that the media is willing to be co-opted and completely surrender whatever pretense they might have had to objectivity. And they just give them a pass. I mean, there's something wrong in this country when you start to act like a banana republic, like a third world country in some way, at least the way we used to define a third world country. Maybe that's become a level that we would aspire to, judging from the behavior that's happening right now. But this is causing a lot of damage, and it's long-term damage of trust. It's long-term damage of confidence and credibility in the system. And it's a long-term problem that I think as a country, we're going to have to resolve this. And I don't think it's going to be that easy. And what they're doing to Trump is absurd. Taking away his buildings and assets, seizing them right before the election, purposely in a clear and just open, blatant method of going after him for something that wasn't even, there was no victim, everybody involved made money. In a common, listen, I'm not a real estate developer in New York, I never could be, but the reality is, if they can do this to him, there's thousands of other people in New York they can do this to as well. And so the message, I'm sure, is to them that you better toe the line, or we're going to do the same thing to you. If you're a business person in New York, you're going to want to get out of New York, or at least dump your assets as quick as possible. And it's just crazy. Part of the reason here, and I don't see the media talking about this too much, but the reason why he wasn't able to come up with a $454 million, or at least a bond for that, is that one of the deciding factors in this case that was so weird was that it explicitly prevented him from being able to go get the money or the surety or the bond for the appeal using any institution that did any business in New York, which is essentially every bank in America. And by eliminating all the potential places that you could go to raise a bond like this, to cover this cost so that you could do the appeal, it raises massive problems in the legal system. I can't believe that there's not an avenue that he can go through to get out of this and still appeal it. But I've never seen this level of legal abuse, and neither has anybody else really in modern times. So it's certainly a real issue. Cristiano, let's see. Let me make sure I've got that. Cristiano, under what circumstances does our state constitution allow the citizens to take down the government by force? Okay, so this is really the same kind of question. I mean, it's funny. Okay, this is actually there's a philosophical question here, right? That's related to this, and being a country like America that was founded in a genuine violent revolution. I mean, we had a revolution against the previous government that controlled, or the British government, right? Americans revolted against them. That was a violent gunpowder casualties war for many years, and it was, even if we were founded on freedom and individual liberty. I mean, the Declaration of Independence is a beautiful document, and Thomas Jefferson did an amazing job drafting that at the time. But we still opened this door at the time that revolution was an acceptable outcome if resistance to tyranny had no other option, right? Now, it wasn't unlimited, as the Whiskey Rebellion and other things that happened along the way. Shays Rebellion, you had, and obviously the Civil War. There were several things that have happened in American history that probably constrains the tendency of Americans to immediately go to violent civil action to change the form of government that they have. However, there's always an implied element to the Second Amendment that was clearly described many times by all the founding fathers in early days of our country, and has, in any kind of legitimate review that you've ever done of the Second Amendment, anybody who's ever done, of the right to keep and bear arms, that there's this implication that at some point in time, if pushed against the wall and given no other choice, Americans have the right to rebel. That's very clearly laid out in there. It's implied, it's clearly laid out. Now, I always think that there's a tremendous amount of ignorance and mythology, I think, that people have. I don't know why, because we should have ample evidence that it's not a good path to go down. Political violence, once you've gone down that road, right, there is no going back. Everything gets thrown out the window, and it turns into a nightmare zone that has generational impacts, and it doesn't necessarily mean the outcome's going to be what you think it is. So I would say that from a practical standpoint, whatever that point in time is, I would have that pushed as far down the road as I possibly could, and find any and every other way that you can to change the direction of tyranny or abuse using nonviolent means. I mean, I think that that's just, from a practical standpoint, that's just the reality. And I don't know why that's hard for people to understand. Most people that seem to advocate for some kind of immediate violent sort of action right now are usually just blowhards. They don't know, they say that, but they don't really mean anything. And instead, what they really mean is they want to encourage somebody else to do it for them because they never do it themselves. And and I find that that's typically what it is, or they're agitators just trying to motivate you to say something stupid. So that's been my experience in the past. The circumstances usually, just going back to Cristiano, what your question was there, the circumstances really have to do with your individual freedom and safety and your own personal safety. And I'm hoping that is a situation that we don't have to get to anytime soon. Ryan, you got a question here. Did you see where the Yakama City Council decided to defund the previous administration's DEI initiative? I did hear about that, thank God. Listen, elections have consequences, and they're not always bad. Sometimes you get good people, and they're actually able to take then their beliefs and implement very practical policies like this that make sense. Every DEI initiative should be defunded in the state. What a destructive, nasty, racist idea that has been imposed on government or private sector or colleges anywhere. It should be defunded everywhere. And I'm glad to hear they did that in Yakama, and hopefully more places will follow suit. Jason, you got a question. Thoughts on Chicago suing Glock, saying that they're machine guns, pushing judge to ban them in Illinois? Listen, I mean, they're always going to... Chicago, of course, is a place where more people die from firearms than anywhere else, and yet they have some of the strictest regulation around firearms anywhere. And the Democrats don't care because the people who die there mostly are poor minority folk, mostly. Usually it's young black men, but a lot of it's gang-related, it is. But they're dying by huge numbers in Chicago in a completely unacceptable volume. And it's very lawless because of it, and they have strict laws that say that shouldn't happen, and yet it's happening all the time. I don't quite understand how people can't see that correlation there, that your stupid laws that make it so that people can't defend themselves, and then you don't enforce the law at all, so you're not arresting criminals, you're not putting them in jail, and letting Chicago turn into a nightmare zone of violent crime is ridiculous. And then, of course, the city, because they're also bankrupting themselves with a failed education system that absorbs more and more money and produces worse and worse results, and a bloated bureaucracy there, just like most of the big cities are run by Democrats. And then, of course, what they're going to try to do is, in order to grab cash from anywhere else, they're going to try to, sue other, like suing Glock or suing something else, somebody else to try to make up for their own defective policies, as though that's going to make any difference. And they know it won't. They're doing it because they simply are pushing that agenda, and that's a way they could see pushing the agenda. It is ridiculous. Technical difficulties. Do you see the semi-auto rifle ban ending in the future? I do. Listen, I remember when the assault weapons ban in 1986 that Reagan signed, which was devastating to me at the time. I was a bit, I remember there was a list of firearms I was hoping to purchase when I was saving my money up. Even when I turned 18, I was going to get those. And when Reagan signed that assault weapons ban in 1986, it was terrible. It really prevented me from being able to do that at the time, and I was devastated by that. And yet that went away. And that was a federal ban. And the truth is, I think the state bans are going to eventually be tossed out. And, it's a mess. And it's annoying to go through it right now. Nobody sells firearms more than Democrats in office. They are the ones who convince more people to buy firearms because of their gun-grabbing agenda. And then this pro-crime caucus, which I did a video a little while ago about some of the votes on the initiative, the police pursuit initiative, and it was interesting because I think it really outed a lot of Democrats in both houses that are pro-crime. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. They like criminals. They seem to support violent crime. They always vote in favor of violent criminals, and they always vote to make you less safe, you and I less safe. And when they out themselves like this, we need to pay attention to who these people are and recognize that those are the exact kind of people that shouldn't be in office. We need to work to remove them. And at least they've identified who they are. T.D. Burton, gas water tanks have a licensed plumber do the work. And I know it's expensive. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, when it comes to installing, now I admit I do my own plumbing and my own gas lines, but you really need to pay attention to what you're doing, and especially the venting. The venting is oftentimes, I think, overlooked, even if they don't, if they're paying attention to how they run the gas line in. What this really was the problem was how they did the venting more than anything else. And that's Evergreen State College today. I noticed that students were complaining about mold, and they were complaining about other things in there too in some of these interviews. So I think Evergreen State College, we need to do a deep dive and look at that campus to see just how harmful and destructive it's become. We don't want students to die, and going there seems to be a dangerous thing for students to do. Let's see. There's a question from Nate, and you didn't put the "We the Government," but I just caught it here. What would it take to get Washington voting law to be 1 day in person, ID required, paper ballots, and no penalty from employers to participate in voting? Or is this a pipe dream? Well, okay, so you have a couple things that you've brought up there. Number one, there's actually generally bipartisan support for the idea of turning Election Day into a holiday. Now, the challenge you're going to have with that is that primary day is not going to be a holiday, most likely. So it would have to be Election Day, the November election each year, making that a holiday. I support that. I think that's a really good idea. I think it's a good idea for civic engagement reasons. Also, to make it part of people's mindset that this is what you should be doing today. Is one thing is going and voting. And it would also facilitate the process of getting away from all the problems and issues that we're dealing with mail-in ballots, and the lack of chain of custody, the lack of transparency, the lack of auditability, just all the problems that have been introduced, the problems that we have with the post office that could be unrelated to the elections, but we've outsourced our process of getting a lot of these ballots back to the post office, which has its own set of problems and issues that we can't control or impact. In-person voting, 1 day decision, so that the counting is done that day. It's very important. Now, one thing when you say all paper, the only thing that's good with mail-in voting is that everything is paper. However, that only helps you if you can actually go back and audit it. The Secretary of State, the auditors, have basically started to create, they're gradually trying to make it almost impossible to do hand recounts, to do any kind of legitimate third-party auditing of what happens with the physical ballots. They've made it so you can't get them as a public record. They've made it so that you have no way of going back and doing statistical sampling to verify accuracy. They've made it almost impossible. And so the ability to do that is there. As far as like the physical ability to do that, which is better than the in-person electronic voting machines that they use in a lot of states. Those are actually worse than mail-in voting. However, with mail-in voting, the benefit that you have of the beam paper is that you need to be able to go back and audit it, and they're eliminating that, or at least trying to close every door and making it possible. And of course, the biggest issue is how they inflate and bloat the voter rolls by registering lots of people that are not U.S. citizens. We have tens of thousands of people in Washington State, probably hundreds of thousands now, registered to vote who are not U.S. citizens. Doesn't mean that they're here illegally. It means they could be here on a H-1B visa, student visa. They could be here in a green card. I've had people contact me under all three of those circumstances who are not U.S. citizens that were registered to vote, sometimes even against their will, even when they told them not to vote. And as anybody who's seen some of my videos in the past of employees who work at the Department of Licensing, they've admitted that they'd get fired if they didn't register those people to vote, even when they told them not to. The whole entire system is set up to register people to vote, whether they're legal to vote or not. And it doesn't mean that they do vote. I don't know, and there's no good way for us to audit how many of them do vote. But if you get a driver's license in the state, you're registered to vote unless you've jumped through incredible hoops to prevent them from registering you to vote. If you get any kind of public services of any kind, they've registered you to vote. They've registered you to vote probably multiple times. So this is why we have a lot of problems in our voting rolls, and that's why I've spent some time trying to clean it up. It's not an easy process, and it's the one thing that people keep threatening to sue me on all the time. The one thing so when you go down this process, getting back to your question here, Nate, it's not a pipe dream, but there's probably only two different paths that one of two different paths that Washington State goes into to have that be an option, where it's same day in-person voting, and you would only have mail voting for limited circumstances like disabled people or overseas deployed military, or out of people who are out of the country or something like that. You can have a limited circumstances of people voting by mail, but the majority of people being able to vote in person counted same day. And one way is, I think, the legal battles that are occurring in other states that may eventually create a federal standardization, whether that's good or not, but overturning some of the mail-in voting systems. It's hard to get worse than the direction that Washington or Oregon or California have gone with the way they're doing mail-in voting. And so as those things keep getting bad and getting worse, then I think at a federal level they may step in at some point in time and make some changes, and then our state will have to go back and adapt. The second thing is if some Republicans start winning. If Republicans start winning, the Democrats will rediscover election integrity as they had discovered it before until 2020. And they'll suddenly rediscover it, and then you'll have bipartisan support to actually make the change. I don't see that happening in time real soon, but that could happen. That's the other path. Or you could get a large enough majority in office in Washington state where they could change it that way too. The popularity of mail-in voting has decreased, certainly, in the last number of years, but it is still a majority of the population that appear to support it, including Republicans. It depends on the problems and drama that continue, but at least at this point in time, even though the popularity has gone down, it's still a majority of people think that it's convenient, right? That's the main reason why people like mail-in voting. It's convenient. Once that popularity drops below 50%, though, it starts to become vulnerable, and you could make changes legislatively. Let's see, Cristiano. No. I don't think Cristiano's a Fed. I think I've met the person who is making that question, so I don't think they're a Fed. Unions love DEI. Yes, they do. Well, they do sort of. I mean, the people who are actually union members hate it, but unions themselves, if they can use it to inflate. Just think of the commissars in the Soviet Union, right? That's essentially what DEI is. It's just implementing this George Orwell's, Animal Farm, right? All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. That's essentially what they're implementing with DEI. Let's see. Do you think the Supreme Court? So this is a question from Alex Brown. Okay, I think you're right. I've already addressed that. Sorry, Alex. Thank you for asking the question, even if somebody else did. My Cup of Tea 101. I am newer to your channel and may have missed a lot of information regarding this question. Do you do any events in the Spokane area? Yes, I do. And thank you for subscribing to the channel. I always appreciate that. We had kind of a surge of people subscribed just recently, and that's a great thing. Despite the YouTube shadow banning, I'm kind of surprised, but a couple of videos somehow broke the matrix and seemed to break through just recently. And so we've had about 1,600 new subscribers. And if you're one of them, happy to meet you, and you're welcome here. I do go out to Spokane periodically. I'm going to be out there in May. But listen, if you want to organize people, I'll come out there and speak as well. Go to your local conservative group if you know who they are. It doesn't matter if it's property rights or Republicans or whichever group they are. I'll be out there in Spokane. I am going to be out there in April, I guess, and I'm thinking about it for the Republican convention. I know I just registered for that, so I'm going to be out there then. If you're going to be there, make sure you come up and say hi. Love to meet any of the people who are new subscribers, especially to the channel. I know a lot of people come up to me in public, and I appreciate it, and I hope that I remain as approachable in public as you probably feel like I am on this video. At the hardware store, at Costco, or the gas station, many places that I've been approached lately by people who are subscribers. I love it. To me, it's I feel honored that you're willing to put the time in and do that, and that you're willing to come up to me. So feel free to do that, and I'm happy to come out to Spokane anytime you get a group of people together. It's nice if it's more than 20 or so, because it makes the trip a little bit more productive. Let's see. Highlands of Lowlands. Question here. Good evening, Glenn from Lopez Island. Great to see you up there in the San Juans. How can we go back to in-person voting? What are the first steps? And thanks for all you do. Well, I kind of addressed that earlier with the previous question, so I don't want to repeat myself too much on that. But listen, document some of the problems. Lopez Island has some weird issues actually out there where there's strange batch voting going on in Lopez Island. About 400 different ballots are essentially compiled together, voted identical in every way. I mean, almost the way the ovals are filled in and everything. And then they're submitted as a batch to the San Juan County auditor. So if you could figure out exactly how that's happening at Lopez, who the who the person is that's kind of compiling those. It looks shady to me, and it's a small community, so I'm surprised that they could hide it for a while, and it's worth looking. So start checking around and see how they do that. Let's see, Donald Larson, will we trust the tabulators? Go back to hand count. Listen, I've been involved in a bunch of hand recounts, and the tabulators are not usually where the problem is from what I've seen. I bet I've been involved in about 30 of them now. We have had discrepancies. They're usually not too significant. And you can actually take a statistical, and this is actually something that I'd recommend that we be able to do, is a randomized statistical sampling of precincts that are counted. The reason why you want to do it by precinct and not batch. Batch counting is not the optimal way to do it. You want to do precinct counting. And to have selected precincts and then verify that those numbers match, I think that would be important. Statistically, you do this in manufacturing, you do this in all kinds of other ways. Why they don't do this on a regular basis, instead they have what they call a logic and accuracy test, which is this. They run a preset pack of ballots through, and they seem to act like it's some accomplishment that the tabulator gives them the same number that they've got the pre-packaged set of ballots on, which is absurd and ridiculous. I mean, it's glad that they do it. It's better than nothing, but that's not a significant way of doing it. You do need to do statistical sampling on hand recounting. You probably need to sample about, I would say, 4 to 5% of the precincts. If you could do that, you would be able to identify any problems that might be there. What you can't do is you shouldn't do, is identify which precincts that you're going to do it. You have to do that random after the fact. So after the ballots are being counted, you do a randomized 5% or more of sampling of precincts in the given county and see if they match the numbers that were otherwise already posted up there. And I think that's an easy way of addressing it. It is ridiculous and absurd that any auditor in the state thinks that's a bad idea. Brian, are you familiar with what's happening with the David Danner, chair of the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission, and Jay Inslee? I don't know. I don't think so. So tell me what I have missed. So if there's something I should know about it. I know that there's been some drama related to the Utilities and Transportation Commission, but I don't know exactly what it is. So let me know what that is. I can look into it. It sounds like if Inslee's involved, I'm sure it's a mess. Jack Palder, can you think of any dam in the state or country that deserves a vote? Just wondering for my own curiosity. Sure. Listen, and I would probably disagree with them, but if I was living in the 5th legislative district, which is in the Issaquah area, and 4 years ago after the primary, right, it was Mark Mullet versus Crazy Town, and they're both Democrats. I don't remember who he was running against a complete nut, and Inslee was backing the crazy nut, of course, and if I had lived in Issaquah at that time, I would have voted for Mark Mullet happily compared to the crazy person that Inslee was pushing. Mark and I would disagree and do disagree on a variety of issues, but Mark Mullet is certainly a better Democrat. He's a math. He understands math is real. I'm not sure if he can define what a woman is, but he at least understands that math is real, and that by itself puts him head and shoulders above most Democrats. Plus, he doesn't love criminals, and he doesn't want to encourage more criminals. And I think it's important to recognize that sometimes you're going to have people. I mean, listen, hopefully you believe something and you know what you believe and why. And then when politicians don't agree with you on that, you could say, listen, I disagree with you here. I agree with you here. 80% of the time we're on the same page, and you're running against somebody that's 100% insane. So it's easy for me to say I'm going to vote for you. I've voted for Democrats myself several times in the past. And it was usually because either they were actually more conservative than the Republican, which has happened, or they were, you had 2 Democrats and you're voting for the better Democrat, the one that's actually sane. And so these aren't hard choices, and I've made them many times myself. And then sometimes I liked Brian Sontag, who was a Democrat state auditor for many years, 20 years. I liked working with him. I voted for him. I thought he was a pretty good guy, actually. And after he was out of office, after he retired, I know I worked with him on a few different projects just in relation to better and more effective ways at trying to uncover corruption or thievery in government. So you will find some out there. I like Gabby Giffords in some way from Hawaii. I know, again, I would disagree with her on some issues, but despite the issues that I would disagree with her on, I think that Tulsi Gabbard. Sorry, I said Gabby Gifford. Tulsi Gabbard out of Hawaii. Anyway, so I think that she's pro-America, right? She loves the country. She served our country. I have a lot of respect for her. I'm sure that we disagree on some things, but anyway, that's you can find some, and you'll find more locally. I think sometimes you'll have people who decide to run for office. They call themselves a Democrat, but they actually care about the community, and they're not so caught up in the agenda of their leftist kind of lobbying organizations. They're rare. And they're becoming rarer because some groups like SEIU, Washington Education Association, Conservation Voters, ACLU, in our state, Fuse Washington, and One America, and all these other groups, they pretty much destroy Democrat candidates early they try to abort them early in the political process if they can, so that they don't accidentally get through to higher office, and then they have the trouble of having a relatively conservative or Democrat or somebody that can think for themselves. Thinking for yourselves is absolutely not allowed. And you can see, if you're a Democrat in particular, and you can see this in how the legislature operated just recently under the rent control bill, which is an interesting debate. There was a Democrat out of Vancouver, and why I'm blanking on her name, I brought her up in the video, and I'm embarrassed right now. I just can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she had studied rent control, and she voted against it and was not in favor of it, killed the bill, and was probably responsible more than anybody else for ending the stupidity of rent control, the recent rent control effort that they were going to try to push through in Washington. Because she actually understood the policy, and she cared about people, at least within this circumstance. I disagree with her on a lot of other issues, but at least in this situation, she just accidentally educated herself, and she was willing to stand up on something that she actually knew pretty well. And if you look at how she was attacked by the left, it's pretty amazing and pretty aggressive. Let's see. Jason, do you think the assault weapons ban bill will pass the Colorado legislature? They had a committee hearing today. Good chance of passing the committee and state house. Yeah, Colorado's had some problems. And that's what happens when you elect people to office locally, which they have in Colorado, that are bad people. And the first thing they want to do is make life more dangerous for the people who live there. And that's what they do. And that is what Democrats seem to do. T.Z. Burton, have you heard of, I think this is Marty Hornick of United Sovereign Americans. She covers election, education, and integrity. That name's not familiar to me. Listen, there's a lot of people that come and go out there. I don't know her. Let's see. I'm trying to find the next question here. Sorry about this, guys. There we go. Chaz, what are your thoughts of allowing illegals to get certification and professional licenses? No. So no, my thoughts are that that's a stupid idea. Listen, if you're going to have being a citizen of a country mean anything, and I realize that there's been a drive by Democrats and the left, more clearly, the left on this issue. It's an effort to destroy a country. It's not an effort to help people who are unfortunate and who come to this country for a better life. It's an effort to destroy the country, because if you can't control who's coming in and regulate immigration in some logical, rational way, then, and listen, plenty of criticism that I have with our immigration system. I remember I worked in a company up in Bellingham for a while. We had this engineer who was here on a green card basis from Switzerland. He was amazing, the exact kind of person that you want to bring in to America. I mean, super educated, very knowledgeable, very skilled, loved America, wanted to be here. And I can't remember, he had to go back to do some kind of paperwork in Switzerland, and when he was coming back to America, they denied him entry and he could never come back again. And it was the first example that I had known personally where the immigration system clearly broke down, because if you're trying to attract capable and good people, that's the kind of guy you want to bring in. You want to bring good people into America, highly educated, capable people. They're going to become entrepreneurial. They're going to provide great value to the country. at one point in time, there was some rational approach that we had with immigration that was focused on that. What you don't do is the insane anarchy that we have right now at the southern border, and then this failure to really address and cut off the incentive structure for illegal immigration in the country now, which is why you're not going to, rent's going to always go up. The cost of goods are going to go up. You're going to have problems with jobs because jobs are going to be paid lower because you're going to have a flooded market with a bunch of people who are willing to do jobs for nothing. Now, rich, wealthy people who view the world as some kind of a farm for them where they can just get these cheap people, cheap labor, they love that. Okay, but the average it's not good for your country. And if you destroy the ability of citizenship to have any meaning or value, which I think this does if you hand out certifications and professional licenses willy-nilly to anybody who wants to get it, whether or not they're a U.S. citizen, I think that's a big mistake. So that's my rant, but I just don't think that's a good idea. Chaz, you got a question? What's the chances for a Republican winning the gubernatorial election this year in Washington State? I'm assuming. So this is a good question. I actually think we have a better than normal chance of Republicans winning the gubernatorial race, and I'll tell you why. Number one, Ferguson doesn't inspire any kind of loyalty or inspiration. He is the opposite of charisma. His name recognition is low. He needs a lot of money in order to get over the top, even though the catbird seat is going to be where he's at because he has some money, more money than anybody else, and he's got the universe of leftist sort of organizations behind him with Nick Hanauer, billionaires, all the usual rich folk are going to be behind him. But he's made a lot of enemies. Even inside the Democrat Party, Republicans this is a foolish thing that Republicans do a lot, is they'll look at the Democrat Party monolithically and just say everybody's the same and they're all walking in lockstep. It's easy to understand that because there is a lot of conformity requirements for the Democrat Party if you're going to be involved at all. Anybody that says there isn't hasn't been involved. I send people over there infiltrate their meetings constantly. And this groupthink and uniformity of thought and action is very, very dominant, especially in the political class and that process. It's very hard for you to be an independent thinker and survive. So with that going on from the outside, it always looks like then that everybody's, they're in lockstep and everybody's joined together. However, that's not really how it works. There's infighting all the time, backstabbing, infighting, like there isn't any organization in which humans are involved. There's always going to be this. And it's even more so there because the left tends to view politics as a religion, and so they take it a lot more seriously and personally. So they're much more vindictive and vicious to each other than what you typically would see. I'm going to say typically on the Republican side. You'll still get that sometimes on the Republican side, but I see it even more aggressively. They really play hardball on the Democrat side once they've decided to kick somebody out of their group or purge their group. I've never seen an organization more nasty and vicious than they are, even though there's a couple Republican chapters that try to match the Democrats that way. Most of the time, that's the way it is. So what happens is over there, that division weakens their ability in some cases to have effective candidates. They did this to themselves a couple years ago in the state treasurer's race where the 3 Democrats ran in a primary that 2 Republicans ran. And the funny thing was the 2 Republicans came through the primary and the 3 Democrats were in a scorched earth campaign against each other and basically divided up the vote almost equally, 3 kind of equally matched candidates, and bounced themselves out of a statewide office, and they handed it to the Republicans simply through their own screw-ups and ego. That happens. It happens more often than people realize. So there's going to be a lot of that type of thing that goes on. You have an unusual situation. It's hard to see how the federal government rate or how the presidential race is going to affect Washington. I don't think it's going to affect it as much as some might. What will affect Washington and voter turnout is going to be the initiatives. And a large number of Democrats, high percentage of Democrats, the majority of independents, and all the Republicans are going to support those initiatives. Even if the Let's Go Washington folk only run a campaign at 1/10 the funded level of the Democrats to the left that they're going to run, that's going to change voter turnout quite well. Because a lot of people may think, I can't tell the difference between Republicans and Democrats, but I don't want to pay a stupid gas tax. I don't want the stupid payroll tax. I don't want the capital gains tax because I know where that's coming. They'll vote that way and vote yes on all 3 of those initiatives. maybe they peter off down below. Maybe they start going down and they start voting for independent folk after that. That's going to change the dynamics of the voter turnout. It's a weird year. That's why I think Republicans can accidentally win sometimes. At least that's sometimes how it happens here. Now, Jason, you had a separate question, which is sort of related to that. Who do you think will win the Republican convention in Spokane? And this is what Jason means when he asks this question. For the first time in Washington state history, probably since ever, since 1935, when the blanket primary system was originally created, and then the top two primary jungle primary was created 20 years ago or so. So what happens in this convention, unique to Washington state, Republican Party anyway, is that they're going to use their Republican Party convention in April, purposely scheduled in April, a few weeks before filing week, which is in May, to have the grassroots activists that are there at the party convention endorse their top candidates for all statewide office holders, which there's 9 of them, right? It's governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, it's the auditor, the treasurer, office of superintendent of public instruction, public lands commissioner, and the insurance commissioner. That's 9 statewide office holders, and then the 10 congressional seats that Washington state has, and so whatever Republicans are running those seats. And the way that works is, I'm presuming that they pitch or try to whip the vote for each of their respective candidates, Republican candidates, self-identified Republicans, so not independents, not Democrat light. It's going to have to be Republicans there. And the Republican Party delegates to the state convention are picking their endorsed candidate. That doesn't mean that they can prevent the person who doesn't win the party endorsement from running for office. The primary is in August, filing week is in May. However, the thought process behind this is that it'll give somebody a boost going into that process, because Republicans have historically, frequently, oftentimes done a self-immolation process on running for office, where just like the Democrat scenario that I described earlier, where the 3 Democrats canceled each other out in the top 2 jungle primary and the 2 Republicans made it through, which is why Dwayne Davidson was treasurer for 4 years as a Republican. The Republicans instead will flood the zone because everybody has a vision from Jesus, and they all decide to run for office at once, and they all believe that that they're called to do this, whether or not they're prepared or know what they're doing. But enough of them will have some name recognition or campaign skills that they'll split up the vote enough that no Republican makes it through. It's happened in the 10th Congressional District. It's happened in the Lieutenant Governor race. It's happened in the Secretary of State race. It's happened in the 47th Ledge District race. The Republicans do this all the time. And mostly it's because Republicans don't believe in this kind of control. So what they're trying to do, the party's trying to do right now, is at least give this endorsement option so that the chosen candidate, whoever it is, comes through and gets the kind of wind at their sails and is able to at least be one of the people, at least guarantee a Republican ends up in the general election because of the jungle primary, top 2 jungle primary system. That's how it works. So now, the big question, somebody asking me about this, Jason, I'm assuming you're asking me because you're wondering about the governor's race, because that's the contentious and highest, most obvious position where there's going to be a food fight going on. So it's Semi Bird and Reichert, Dave Reichert. Those are the 2 Republican candidates for governor. So the question is, which of them have done a better job whipping support among the maybe up to 3,000 delegates, give or take, that the Republicans have, PCOs, precinct committee officers mostly, but it'll be some other people that have gone through the county convention process, and they show up there. And I don't have an answer for that. Both camps have tried to do a pretty good job whipping up their voters and supporters. I would say, if I was to just look at it on just the raw time and energy spent, I would give Byrd a little bit of an edge in this vote process. But I wouldn't count Reichert out, because although he's been late to the party, I see more work that he's done over the last few months. And I think part of that's overcoming some consultant incompetence on their part, but where it looks like they've started to reach out. So you got these 2 different factions going in. I don't know who's going to get the endorsement. What I do know is I doubt either one of them is going to drop out regardless of who gets the endorsement. That would be my impression in that particular race. The other race where this endorsement's probably going to carry a lot of weight is going to be OSPI, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, because you have 4 people that actually have a degree of well, three probably in particular, but you have a number of Republicans running in that race, and it's going to matter because it's a little bit less. It's further down the ticket. Nobody's paying attention to it so much. So that race, I think it's going to matter. I think you're going to see it matter a little bit in the Public Lands Commissioner race. You have Sue Peterson and Jamie Herrera Butler running. Jamie Herrera Butler's probably a little bit better known name recognition, but not always in a good way. A lot of people don't like the fact that she voted against Trump. But Sue Peterson, and again, I know these people. These are all people I know. Sue Peterson doesn't have a lot of money, and so you're going to have some people vying for a couple of these positions. You'll have a little bit of that as well in probably the 10th Congressional District. You'll have a little bit of that in the 3rd Congressional District. 10th is around Olympia. 3rd is in Southwest Washington, Joe Kent. Joe Kent's probably in the lead there from an activist standpoint because he came through a little bit early and already got the endorsement of the state. So I don't think that's going to necessarily rise to some kind of a debate at the state level. That was kind of unusual. But you're going to have a couple of these other races. The Attorney General really only has Pete Serrano running as a Republican. So I don't see that race will be, will pop out as a high drama race. But we'll have to see. So a lot of this stuff's going on right now. The importance of them doing this before filing week in May is, in theory, gives candidates the option to sit back and reevaluate their campaign, saying, listen, if I don't have the support of the Republican Party and I don't have any money and I don't have a campaign plan for winning, other than Jesus take the wheel, maybe I should adjust and adapt to a different scenario before I have to sign on the dotted line in May and actually be on the ballot in August. That's the theory. And so we'll see what happens. I will be there, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But it's we'll just have to see what happens. What do you think about Matt Brown and the change going on in Yakama? This is MCT asking a question here. And listen, I love what Matt Brown's doing in Yakama. I think the city of Yakima is in much better hands right now. So I think that's great. Let's see. I'm getting closer to closing down. One last question here, and then I'm going to have to end this here. Vladimir, I'm assuming. What do you think about Washington removing the bar exam requirement to become an attorney? I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. And I've been in court a lot, so it's not. I'm speaking at some level of experience. And I've been in a lot of litigation. It's not hard. You can look me up. I've been in lots of litigation, some in federal, mostly in state court. And so it's not hard to see that I worked in a law firm for a couple of years. My dad was an attorney. 6 of my roommates became attorneys. I have about a little universe of attorneys I work with on a regular basis. So, the theory behind the bar, of course, was that they wanted to have some level of professionalism when it comes to people who are claiming to be an attorney actually knowing what they're doing. Now, anybody that's ever used attorneys, very often you'll find out there's a lot of people that pass the bar exam that are complete clowns and shouldn't be allowed to practice law, unfortunately. However, I'm not sure that removing the bar exam requirement to become an attorney is necessarily a good thing. I think you're going to have some kind of a test if you're going to represent other people. You've always had the ability to represent yourself pro se, as I've done a few times. And so you could do that, and that's always been an option. But if you're going to represent other people, there has to be some level probably of knowing that you actually know what you're doing. And those are my thoughts. Doesn't mean I'm happy with the bar. The bar's had a lot of problems in the state. I don't think you should have to be a member of the bar to be an attorney, but you're going to have to pass some kind of exam, I think. And I would say that's similar to medical. You want some level of knowledge that a structural engineer knows what they're doing, some level of validation that a doctor knows what they're doing. How you want to do that, I'm open a little bit, but you're going to have something. Let's see. I've got 2 last questions. I'm going to just try to shove this in a little bit here. Let's see. Here's this. What are the major differences between Byrd and Reichert? Well, I mean, what's interesting about the contrast between the two candidates, and I'm trying to say this in a very, I'm not endorsing anybody here. I'm just saying I met both of these guys in person. I do like both people. They're different personalities. I think Bird's done a really good job starting early and getting to know a lot of people. And that's a wise thing. When I do campaign training, especially for bigger offices, more significant offices, I always try to say start early. If you start late, you lose early. Typically, if you start early, you're building the foundation for a more successful race, particularly considering the size of the state. And the fact is, nobody knows enough people. Nobody, no matter how good you are and how capable you are of your networking, you're not going to know more than usually a few hundred people. Maybe you've done an amazing job, you know thousands, but it's hard to get out past that point. So Bird laid the foundation early. Reichert's going to come with more money, and that's obvious based on the campaigning here. Bird has struggled to raise money, so that's the difference between them. And so the drama, I don't get caught up as much in some of the drama back and forth of PDC complaints or any of the other stuff. Both of them do have military backgrounds. Bird's military background is probably more impressive in some ways, but Reichert's been sheriff for a while. That's a little bit more tied into some of the law enforcement issues that you're going to see here. Bird's had direct engagement at the local government level in the school district. Reichert's had congressional experience. You're going to have, they're just different personalities, and so with different backgrounds and different resumes. And ultimately, you're going to have to look at each of them and say, which person do I think has a better chance of being governor? Which person do I think would do a good job if they got in there and became governor? And that's going to be the decision that people have to make. It's going to be up to us. Now, let me clarify something here, that these guys are, either one of them is a universe better. I mean, it's impossible. They are so much better than Ferguson. Ferguson is like this evil Satan, running for office. I mean, it's hard to get somebody more corrupt and dishonest and terrible in there than Ferguson. So any of these Republicans, frankly, if you had to pull a homeless drug addict out of a camp in Seattle and put him in governor's office instead of Ferguson, that'd be a better choice. So Ferguson, you have to put this in perspective. That guy is a complete nightmare. And so any of these guys would be better than Ferguson. The weird personally attacking each other sort of fighting that goes on in the primary, people take that very personally. And I would caution you not to do that so much, because one of these guys is going to prove that they have the ability to reach enough people that they come out of the primary ahead of the other. One of them will. And whoever it is, whoever's opposed to Ferguson is the one that we would want to have in office. And I think that's a big deal. So I wouldn't get too much more concerned about that. But please pay attention. Everybody has to make that choice. I've interviewed Bird. You can see my interview. It was not a hard-hitting interview. It was just an opportunity for him to talk about it himself. And I asked a couple different questions there. It wasn't, mainly I just like to put people up without a lot of interruptions. You can kind of see who they are. I have offered to do the same thing for Reichert. I would like to do the same thing for him, to be fair. If I can, I will do it as soon as I possibly can. These guys are busy. They're running around. They got a busy campaign. I was later to reach out to Reichert because Bird started a lot earlier, and a lot of people were asking me to interview him for a while. So that's where we're at right now. Listen, guys, I'm going to close this live stream out for now. Sorry I didn't have one last week. I am sorry if you happened to log in for my 7-second screw up about 30 minutes before this one started. That was my incompetence, nobody else's. And with that, I just want to remind everybody to get involved, be engaged. We got a lot of stuff going on, and next week I will try to address the top 10 worst bills in Olympia, as well as the do kind of an update on the governor's race and maybe some of these other statewide races as well, talk about them a little bit more in depth. So that's kind of my plan for next week. We'll see if I can stick to it. Otherwise, watch my 3 videos that'll be coming up this over the next couple days. And again, please keep sharing this channel out. The more the subscribers I get, the better I think the reach is, and the more it helps, I think, make a difference. And with that, I'm going to close it all down. Thanks for the questions, guys. And I'm planning to do this again next Tuesday, so we'll see you then.